Karl Storz are proud sponsors of this podcast. Discover why Karl Storz is the name synonymous with innovation, precision, and excellence in the world of surgical endoscopy.
This is Wentz and Friends, the podcast of Women in ENT Surgery UK. I'm your host, Alex Ashman. This season, we'll be looking at key career advice on returning to training, working less than full-time, and applying for fellowships. And we'll be looking at factors that can make the working lives of women and minority individuals more challenging, and what we can do about them. Today, we'll be talking to Miss Michaella Cameron, an ENT registrar in London, about her experience of taking leave and returning to training. But first, a brief word about our sponsors. The Wentz and Friends podcast is sponsored by Karl Storz UK, who have kindly supported the podcast from the beginning and continue to do so for a second season. The podcast is also sponsored by the ENT UK Foundation, who have kindly supported this season with an educational grant. Thank you to Karl Storz UK and ENT UK Foundation for their support. Miss Michaella Cameron is an ENT registrar in London. She's worked as programme coordinator for the Lewin programme with Melanin Medics. She's had roles with SFO and BRS. She's an RCS England Emerging Leaders programme, a member of the Women in Surgery Forum, and also a mother of two. So welcome, Michaella.
Thank you, Alex, for inviting me today to speak on topics very, very dear to my heart. I'll also like to add, just taking off my committee hat and clinician hat, but I would like to say that I hope my friends and my colleagues would also describe me as someone who's just really enthusiastic about ENT as a specialty on a whole, caring to patients, but also, most importantly, approachable to all. I'm also very passionate in general about surgical leadership, equity and training, and making a space for women to thrive in ENT on their terms.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so glad we've got you on today. I wanted to ask, before we get into the discussion about returning to training, how do you keep all those plates spinning? How do you sort of distribute your time to each task in turn? How do you manage that?
I would say that it is difficult. I have leaned into various levels of mentorship, and actually on my way here, I was speaking to Felicity Meyer, who's chair of WINS, and I asked her the exact question. How did she keep going? She has so many plates spinning and she still finds time to support me in my various initiatives. And I echo what she has said, actually. It's important that what you are doing resonates with your why and your core values. I don't think it's wise to do things that are just a tick box, because you would run yourself at risk of burnout or feeling excessively overwhelmed or excessively anxious. So it's important to prioritize and celebrate the small wins. So my to-do list is always long, no matter what I do to try to shorten it. There's always something else popping up, but it gives me joy. It gives me a sense of fulfillment and purpose. And that's what gives me that energy to keep going. So after every day, if I can say I've ticked off one task, I celebrate that. And I say, that's a good job, Michaella. Let's keep going until we can't. And just the next day, just keep going with that positive mindset. So sometimes you might have a season where you're focusing on being, top of the list registrar, or sometimes you need to carve out time to spend with your family and your children, or carve out time for just you time, me time. One of the things I like to do, and I say this to my friends and they often laugh, is there was a year, 2 years ago, where every Wednesday after my morning list, I would go to a Japanese restaurant just by myself. They know me so well. They know exactly what I like to order, exactly what I like to drink with my ramen noodles. But that 40 minutes or 2 hours is just for me to just be by myself and be in my thoughts and then just enjoy being alone. So it's difficult, it's achievable. And to echo what Felicity Meyer said to me this morning, we often underestimate what we can achieve. And it's important not to get into your head about things. It can work just with the right tools.
It's very sensible. So the first thing I want to talk about with you today, in terms of taking leave, is when you're in that position where you're going to be taking an extended period out of training, be it for maternity, be it for health, be it for whatever other project or thing you need to do. What sort of planning is involved? What lessons have you learned from going through that process a couple of times?
Yes, so I'm actually on my second maternity leave. 3 years ago, I embarked unplanned into a 9 to 10 months of shielding during my first pregnancy. That was not something I expected, but it was the safest thing to do for me. And then I took 12 months out for my first maternity leave. So I would firstly like to say that stepping out of trading, having now gone through it twice, it can feel like you are stepping off a conveyor belt, a moving train. I'd never taken out any time out of either medical school or residency until then. But with planning, support, most importantly, and being comfortable with uncertainty, it can become a time of immense growth. Now, when I took time out the very first time, I would say my mentors really helped me stay positive because I did feel quite despondent. I was worried that taking time out meant that I was going to be behind in trading, behind because of the COVID pandemic, but now also behind because I'm taking time out longer than I had planned. So it was a difficult time, to be honest, Alex, back then. But I would say that I was able to flip it on the head and actually achieve a lot of things outside of just operating. So what helped me? 3 things. Leaning into supervisors who I wholeheartedly came to really trust. I had a few, but there were 3 in particular. My educational supervisor at the time, Mr. Ainan Lewis, who's a rhinologist, Miss Sonia Fiaccio, who was a previous clinical supervisor, but an honorary big sister, I would call her now, and the program director at the time, Mr. Tarrant Tatner. So what they really did well was they saw me as a human being as opposed to just a registrar or a number. They allowed me to be vulnerable and to speak about the things that was causing me levels of anxiety. They normalized taking time out of training. They said to me, Michaella, this is important. And actually, Mr. Ainan Lewis said to me, do you know, Michaella, you're going to come back after this time out as a mother, and you might find yourself being an even better registrar with that additional learned experience and new empathy, new focus. And at the time, I thought to myself, I'm not sure I can see where he's going here. But now I could say I absolutely know what he meant. Only 10% of doctors take time out during their trading. So 10% is actually quite a minority group, if you think about it. 90% of people don't. And I gave a talk at the International Women's Day for WINS at the Royal College a couple of months ago. And I took that opportunity to survey the attendees just to find out what their experiences were if they had taken time out. And I believe about 41% of the attendees had taken time out. And their 2 top reasons for taking time out was maternity or academia. And when I asked them about what areas did they find to be the biggest challenge with regard to going back into training, I'll just paraphrase, but one of the reasons was they felt uncertainty about being trusted to do the job again. They felt anxiety surrounding looking or feeling rusty. And of course, there was anxiety surrounding confidence in operating. And lastly, they felt that the mum or dad guilt was there. So leaving children at home, missing milestones. So it is really vulnerable. It's a vulnerable season to be in when you've taken time out and trying to prepare to go back into training stronger than you were before.
What advice would you have for those who are going to be taking leave in the near future? I mean, do they have to be proactive in reaching out for this support? Is anything going to sort of happen automatically, or does it really have to be sort of do it yourself and go out and find your mentors, find your support, find out how things work?
Shouldn't be down to the registrar or the clinician, let's say clinician, because people take time out of work in general when they're not in training. So ideally, it shouldn't be just down to the individual to know about the resources or signpost themselves to links or help. But a good starting point, I would say, is meeting with your educational supervisor and being aware of platforms such as Support. Support's really good, and the whole premise is, as the name suggests, supporting clinicians to return back into training in a smoother way. So you can find 3 forms to complete, which will shape discussions you should be having with your educational supervisor. And those 3 forms are your pre-absence form, so before you go off, pre-return form, which should ideally be done 12 to 16 weeks before returning back to work, and then your follow-up, or when you've gone back to work, and ideally as soon as you can, to touch base with the educational supervisor, just to frame areas that you want to work on, perhaps when you're off, and areas that you want to work on and fine-tune when you go back into work. An example could be, perhaps you want to be connected with a career coach so you can strategize how to improve how you show up to work, your communication skills. I hate to use the word resilience, but there is resilience training that you could link into. Public speaking, things like that. Or how to revise better. So these are things that you can easily get through support for free. So you can find a career coach, or you can find a mentor. So I found that was quite helpful, because it helped me consider and reflect on my personal and professional goals. So also I would say, don't forget your why. I alluded that to the why initially when we started speaking. So the why is really important. So why do you want to go back to work? Why do you want to continue being a registrar or a consultant? When you'll have a bit of a wobble with doubts, figuring out your why will help you be excited and confident about returning back to work. So, and just to finish off, I would say that the skills you can gain when you are on maternity or paternity leave or academic, out of program experience, can definitely shape your next phase in.
At Karl Storz, we're proud to be supporting this podcast. Trusted by prestigious hospitals, universities, and medical associations, our dedication to patient safety goes beyond equipment. We're committed to advancing education, hosting over 500 events each year to train the next generation of surgeons. Karl Storz, one name, all solutions.
You were saying about support, obviously support being support with, I think, 2 T's on the end, because it's returning to training in capitals. We'll pop a link in the description, the show notes about that. Moving on to returning to training, when you came back to training, did you make use of any of the things that support offers, like being supernumerary for a period or considering less than full-time training or anything else like that?
Good question. Thank you. I absolutely did. I would say coming back to training is a mix of emotions, despite me engaging with my program director and creating a phased return back to work and completing several sessions with a career coach. I still had a little inkling of doubt, as in, do I still have it? Have I, lost my edge? And I would say that I felt a lot more confident restarting, having engaged with support. So I did apply for funding, which I would not have known about if I hadn't engaged with support. So there is funding you can apply for, which goes directly to your department. It doesn't go into your bank account. It goes directly to the department's bank account. And what they use that funding for could be many things. But what I used it for was to cover my on-calls during the first 4 weeks of my return. So that was helpful. So the department's able to get funding to pay for locums to cover your on-calls, and you're given some space to get used to being back in that workplace arena within hours. So, of course, as you know, Alex, being an ENT registrar, if you're able to, you can do your on-calls off-site. And although it's not very common that you get called out overnight, depending on where you work, it's still that worry of, do I feel comfortable operating on my own overnight or dealing with an emergency? And there are no medals for bravery. And I quote a military consultant I used to work for back in Frimley, there are no medals for bravery. So it's okay. And let's just normalize that it's okay to want to take a bit of time to get used to working again, particularly out of hours. So that was helpful. There's also, for the mums listening, there's also a Facebook group called Physicians Mums Group, which is really, really helpful. There are archived and current posts that are so honest and very relatable, which made me feel less out in the wilderness and less kind of overwhelmed with getting used to going back. So reading others' experiences and what helped for them, that did help me too.
I mean, yeah, we've had in Oxford colleagues returning to training come and do exactly as you said. They've been supernumerary for a time. They've been off the on-call rota. They've shadowed some colleagues, maybe slightly senior colleagues, and got the feel for it. And then when they felt ready to, they went straight back in and got on, which is lovely.
Yes, shadowing's important, just to add. So keeping in touch days is an opportunity I would recommend to everyone, even if you've been out of training before and this is your second or third rodeo, still use that. So what I also did was I just 2 weeks or a week before I went back into training, I went to my local hospital and I just went to theatre. Again, I shadowed a rhinologist and I just got used to hearing the lingo in theatre again. I got used to running through the WHO checklist, simple things like that, and holding the 0 degree scope. I didn't necessarily operate, but just hearing the instrument names again, that helped me a lot. So when I was then registrar in theatre, doing something simple like, just a standard fez, I felt like, okay, I've done this a couple of weeks ago. Let's get the muscle memory going again. And that helped my psychological preparation for going back into the theatre workplace again.
Absolutely. You really want to have those that muscle memory switch back on when you go back into things, don't you?
Yeah. If you just do the first couple of steps, so what I was trying to say, that helps. You won't be expected to do perhaps the whole procedure, but just being able to, decongest the nose. That's a win. That's a win.
I mean, is there anything you'd do differently or you think you're doing differently this time round? And any advice for those who'll be returning to training soon?
It's important to be in the moment. And my career coach would also say it's important to be kind to yourself and allow yourself to grow outside of surgery, outside of being a clinician. So what I would like to do and what I will be doing this time is I am going to travel more, Alex. So my first time out, I did not go on holiday. Tut. So this time, although I might not be going to the Bahamas for 2 months, I will definitely be going on short but frequent holidays just to really switch off and immerse myself on the beach somewhere with a mocktail or a cocktail. We'll see how it goes. But other things I would have done differently in all seriousness, I probably would have sat down with my supervisors more intentionally when I first started and outlined my expectations and confirmed their expectations of the job. So when you haven't taken time out, transferring between jobs or hospitals can be rocky at the best of times. Imagine taking 2 years out, which I had taken the first time round. I hope we are encouraged to be vulnerable about educational supervisors, and I hope that culture of vulnerability becomes more normalized. So I wanted to really show that I am able to catch up really quickly. I am no different to my colleagues who'd had not taken time out, but I think that's a wrong mindset to have, and actually that's a trap. I think it's important to say, honestly, I really want you to talk through this operation a bit slower. I want to ask more questions and I'd like to observe more. What do you expect of me? And have that candid talk in the beginning. And although the day-to-day is really, really busy, being intentional of carving out time to get feedback, more frequent feedback than you would have done perhaps if you hadn't taken time out. And just being clear of what you want to get out of the job. So that's what I would have done differently. That first meeting, make it more frequent throughout the job.
That sounds like very good advice. You're in a position of being an emerging leader and being involved in WINS, Women in Surgery Network. So as you go forward, what do you feel that you would be lobbying to have changed, or what do you think should be done to improve the system of both, people taking leave and returning to training for maternity reasons or for other reasons? What do you think, based on your journey and on your experiences, do you think needs changing over time?
So firstly, I would say that the Merging Leaders Fellowship, I had applied during my first maternity leave because I really wanted to work on my softer skills and generally to figure out what type of leader am I and how do I see myself leading as I became more senior. I wanted to figure out what are the tools that I need to shape. And I think the fellowship initiative was fantastic. And that's how I met you, Alex. And it was launched obviously in 2015, and it's a 2-year structured program. And it helps, women and non-binary individuals find their voice in leadership. With that experience, I became a lot more confident in the feeling that I could affect change. And I was placed, just like yourself, networks that if you have an idea, they will help you grow it. So what I'm really, really excited about is a initiative that I am creating with WINS and the Royal College. And it's centered on the premise that surgery isn't a one size fits all. And we need to make space for more diverse journeys. And that's how we make our profession stronger and how we retain people like myself who have to take time out for various reasons and come back stronger. So my project, it's called Back to the Scalpel. It came to me one night. I just had an epiphany. I'm going to call it Back to the Scalpel. And essentially what it is building an intentional return to training program, one that doesn't just focus on the logistics. So the form fill-ins, we know how to do that now. We know the resources to link into to do that. Instead, it's focusing on identity, confidence, and creating a sense of belonging. And in particular, this project is really innovative because I want to incorporate the use of extended reality and simulation, which would allow clinicians who are returning back to work through scenarios that they might be anxious about before they go back to work. And an example could be, can you think about perhaps a boss who you may have had difficulties with understanding their language or their personality despite your best efforts? So how about working through that scenario in an extended reality setup where you are able to figure out better communication strategies to tackle that scenario or that situation, flexibility, adaptability, and therefore when you go back to work, you feel more emboldened to manage the different types of trainers that you might meet along the way. So it's a work in progress, but
Of course.
I'm really, really excited about it. Something I've been thinking about for a couple of years now. And we're at the stage now where we should be soft launching by the end of the year. Essentially, yes, so representation really does matter. And they do want to challenge this probably outdated idea of what a typical surgeon looks like. So I know I probably don't fit the mold and probably a little bit worky, but I want to kind of reshape the notion that, the more the merrier. And I hope that comes across.
That makes complete sense. That sounds like a really useful project. So I think probably that's all I wanted to ask you today. So we talked about taking leave and the lessons you've learned there. We talked about returning to training and both cases, how useful the support with 2Ts on the end program is and your experiences with it. And I mean, we're really looking forward to seeing what you have, for us in the next year or so in terms of a more structured program with the college for surgeons, because they are surgeons returning to work. So, I mean, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us. It's been really, really interesting and really useful. And is there anything else you want to say before we finish?
I would say that taking leave isn't necessarily a pause, it's part of a journey, and I think it will become more and more common as the years go on. But you can grow, add more bows or feathers. But it's important to build your support network, even if it doesn't exist, create it, whether it's a Facebook group or whether it's a leadership, fellowship, friends, family, lean in. And you don't need to be that typical surgeon. You can be a very, very good surgeon on your own terms. And this is for myself, it's okay to ask for help often, because one day you'll be that person that someone else reaches for, and you'll be ready to pass on the baton and just be kind. That's the most important thing. Be kind.
And lift as you climb, as you're saying.
Lift as you climb. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Wentz & Friends, the podcast of Women in ENT Surgery UK. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure you subscribe on your podcast app of choice, leave us a review and share it on social media. Don't forget that we have a back catalogue of episodes on a range of subjects from mat leave and menopause to surgical training and culture change. We're on Twitter, Threads, Instagram and LinkedIn, so make sure you follow us for details of upcoming episodes and events. And if you're an ENT UK member, you can join Wentz UK, if you haven't already, via your online membership page. Thanks again to all of our guests for this season, and to Carl Storz UK and ENT UK Foundation for sponsoring Season 2 of Wentz & Friends, the podcast of Women in ENT Surgery UK. Wentz & Friends is produced and directed by Heather Pownall of Heather's Media Hub. The podcast was created by Ekpemi Rooney. The rest of the team includes Anna Slovic, Catherine Conroy, Marie Lyons, Tanya Tarr, and me, Alex Ashman.
Next week, we'll be talking to Miss Lizzie Morn about integrating clinical and research roles and taking time out of programme for research. Until then, take care and thanks for listening.